Hong Kong offers access to Hong Kong's capital markets, which is very important to a lot of family offices. It's a much deeper and much bigger stock market, and it offers access to China. So if you're a family business, family office that wants to invest in China, do business with China, and in fact some of the Singaporean family offices who find that they have increasing exposure or interest in China are also wanting to have something in Hong Kong as well, for being just to be closer to China.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the latest episode of the Global Economic Perspectives with Raymond. And today, we are very honored to have the Vice Chairman of the Singapore Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Basil Huang, with us today. Thank you, Basil.
Thank you, Raymond, for coming today.
Let's get things started.
Sure.
Can you give the audience a brief introduction of the Singapore Chamber of Commerce?
Yes. The Singapore Chamber of Commerce was founded in 1995. So we've been in Hong Kong 30-something years now, just over 30 years. We are composed mostly of Singaporean-led or Singaporean businesses that have a close connection or are based in Hong Kong. So a lot of our members are either in the real estate or the finance industry, and the majority of our members are corporate members rather than individuals.
Okay. So how many corporate members do you have in Hong Kong?
I'll need to check the latest numbers, but we have about 220, 250 members at the moment.
Having said that, in the recent years or the last decade, the China, Hong Kong, and the Asian countries mainly the integrate and collaborations of the trade and all types of corporations. Does that have any changes to the role of the Chamber in Hong Kong, or is there any specific policies that you guys have for the upcoming trend of the integrations of all the Asian countries?
Well, I think it's very exciting to see that the trade between ASEAN as a whole and China and Hong Kong grow a lot in the last few years. ASEAN is, I believe, both Hong Kong's largest trading partner as well as China's largest trading partner today. In terms of the trade of certain products, Singapore is the largest trading partner with Hong Kong. So definitely, I think the role of the chamber, especially the Asian chambers, we've moved away from a world where a unipolar world where all of Asia was mainly servicing the West, servicing American markets and European markets, to a world where increasingly intra-Asian trade is the dominant theme of the day.
Okay, let's get to investment. Can you tell us the current status of bilateral investment between Hong Kong and Singapore in the past few years?
Sure. There's historically there's always been a lot of Singaporean investment in Hong Kong. Our Prime Minister was just here recently, Prime Minister Lawrence Wong, and he met the Chief Executive John Lee, and he was taken on a tour to the northern metropolis, as you might have heard. And I think Prime Minister Lawrence Wong mentioned that Singapore could consider investing or participating in the northern metropolis. This would not be unusual for Singapore. You have to remember that in the 1990s, Singapore was the first country, and I think the only country at that point in time, to make a very big investment and set up the Sichuan investment park in Sichuan, right? So Singapore has a long history of investing both in industrial parks, industrial estates. Unlike Hong Kong, Singapore never gave up its manufacturing industry. So on the west side of Singapore, there's a huge manufacturing base, mainly in the oil and gas, but also in machinery and things like that. And then Singapore developed industrial estates in China. So the concept of Singapore then making investments in something like Northern Metropolis is not foreign at all to Singapore.
That's very nice to know, very nice to know. In terms of the recent years' geopolitical tensions globally, does that affect the investment objective and the trade policies of Singapore?
I think as the I think cities like Hong Kong and Singapore adapt to the times. We are small cities in a big world. We are very wealthy cities. We are very influential cities considering relative to our tiny sizes, but nonetheless we're still small cities. So we have to adapt, and I'm very happy to see Hong Kong adapting to the new world so quickly. I think many people say Hong Kong is back. I hope it's true. I feel like it's true. There's a lot more activity in Hong Kong now. Singapore, the same way, has to adapt to a changing world. We live in the world order is changing. You see the powers that were dominant in the 1990s, the early 2000s, they seem to be changing direction, maybe withdrawing a bit, and you see a new power in the world, China, rising. And becoming very influential, and Singapore lives in the backyard in a sense. I use that in a very loose way, but Singapore is very close to China, right? So I think we need to adapt to the new world order as well, and that new world order, the reality of that new world order is, as I've mentioned earlier, that there's increasing trade within the East Asian, Asia Pacific region, whereas that trade used to be focused on the West, focused on America, focused on Europe. Today, America and Europe have their own challenges, and in its place, we see trade within Asia growing very quickly.
Let us get more specific. Sure. I think the U.S.-China trade tensions and the geopolitical tensions between U.S. and China has changed the landscape a lot the past few years. Does that change the perspective of Singapore doing business or doing trade with China and with Hong Kong?
I think the as I mentioned, the changing world order is forcing many countries to change their perspective. It's not a question of whether you want to or not. You have to. In today's world, you have to change. You have to change your perspective. Many people of certainly my generation grew up, and the generations before that grew up in a world where the West was the most powerful, the West was the richest, the West was the most influential. That is changing as well. So perhaps the younger generation will have a slightly different perspective on where they see value, where they look to for references, cultural references, and whom they're more influenced by in terms of the way of thinking. But certainly today you see you see the changes that are happening in the West, which are not good changes. They're by and large a lot of them are negative changes. That's definitely I think Singapore, just like Hong Kong, has to adapt to the new reality.
Okay. By saying that, you have just mentioned that point, Hong Kong and Singapore now rank 3rd and 4th in the Global Financial Center Index. What is the view or the standpoint of the chambers that Hong Kong and Singapore, are we competitors in a way, as you mentioned, constructive competitions, or do you think there's a lot of opportunities we are as complementary to each other?
We are both, Singapore and Hong Kong are both complementary and competitive with each other. I do get questions quite often from people. It's like about the competition between Hong Kong and Singapore. I firmly believe, and I think a lot of people who are enlightened will agree, that the competition is a healthy and constructive one.
Agree, yeah.
Every time that the one city does something, the other city cannot avoid thinking about whether it should be doing better, and that drives each of these cities forward. In the lack of some form of constructive competition like this, both cities are wealthy cities. There is a tendency to say, well, we're here already. We don't need to do anything more. We're good, and that's not a good approach to take in a changing world.
Okay. Let us get to more specific again.
Sure.
In terms of virtual assets, and family office. Singapore are doing very well in the past decade, and Singapore have developed family office, wealth management, and the virtual assets business quite ahead of Hong Kong in the last decade. And now Hong Kong is, I think, starting to catch up with that. Do you see that as a competition, a niche competition, or do you think Hong Kong and Singapore could complement each other in terms of family office and virtual assets?
Let's go over each of those things you mentioned, Raymond. Okay, and let's start with virtual assets. Okay, in the virtual asset space, Singapore got a head start. Singapore started in developing its virtual assets rules in, I think, 2021, 2022. Hong Kong has been, the SFC in Hong Kong has been talking about regulating virtual assets since 2018. But really in the last 2 years have we started coming up in Hong Kong with a very comprehensive set of rules. Singapore came up with a omnibus legislation, but hasn't really embraced virtual assets in the same way Hong Kong has. I would say today, Hong Kong is not in a situation of catching up. Hong Kong, in any of the top GFCs, global financial centers, international financial centers in the world, has the most developed suite or most developed set of virtual assets, legislation and framework anywhere in the world for any of the developed jurisdictions. Okay, so I think Hong Kong, certainly on the framework side, is very far ahead. Right? I think we saw over the last few years, in terms of the family office, going to what you said about family offices, a lot of family offices wanting to, because of a perceived weakness, in which I think was a wrong perception in Hong Kong, a lot of family offices chose to set up or to move to Singapore. However, today, I believe the assets under management by family offices in Hong Kong is now actually between Hong Kong and Singapore is about the same now, and so it is with the number of family offices. Sometimes one is more, sometimes one is less, but they're kind of neck and neck, and both Singapore and Hong Kong, I believe, stand to benefit from and I don't mean this in a disrespectful way to any other place, but with the global uncertainty in the world today, East Asia, with Hong Kong and Singapore as the focuses, have suddenly become safe haven jurisdictions. We see just in the last few months, 3 to 6 months, a lot of new family office inquiries, people wanting to set up or diversify into Hong Kong. And I think each of these cities has their own strengths. We talked a bit about different financial markets, Forex, the futures, the stock market. Singapore is very strong on commodities and Forex. Hong Kong's stock market, even at its worst, was 10 or more times bigger than Singapore's stock market. So, each of the cities has their own strength, and those are traditional strengths, and those strengths continue even today.
Can you enlighten us, as you mentioned? What do you think the advantages of Singapore in starting up family office business? I understand that they are doing very well. You guys are doing very well. What do you think is the cutting edge or the advantage that you guys have, or the policy? What does it difference from the other nations or other jurisdictions that you guys are doing so well?
I would say it's rather than a policy matter. Hong Kong has been very active in encouraging, the Hong Kong government is very active in encouraging family offices to set up here, and will provide support to new family office setups. So very supportive of it, right? I think Singapore's, I wouldn't say it's an advantage. I think the relative differences, and if a family office were to ask me, I'd say, and they say we want to relocate to East Asia, or we want to set up in East Asia, in our part of the world, the Asia Pacific, I would say you should consider both Hong Kong and Singapore, right? And Singapore offers access to the Southeast Asian markets more easily, and it also offers banking secrecy, which we don't in Hong Kong we have bank confidentiality, but we don't have bank secrecy. In Singapore, the secrecy for banks is in the legislation and is punishable by criminal. It's a criminal offense to breach banking secrecy. So the banking secrecy laws in Singapore are very strict. So that could be an advantage for some people. Hong Kong offers access to Hong Kong's capital markets, which is very important to a lot of family offices. It's a much deeper and much bigger stock market, and it offers access to China. So if you're a person, if you're a family business, family office that wants to invest in China, do business with China, and in fact, some of the Singaporean family offices who find that they have increasing exposure or interest in China are also wanting to have something in Hong Kong as well, for being just to be closer to China.
Okay. Having said that, family office business and the asset management business, as Hong Kong and Singapore are top 4 in the global financial center index, right? There's some very niche new innovation of financial products, say green finance, as we mentioned, Islamic finance, and there's a lot of new types of investment products or innovations. Do you think Hong Kong and Singapore in a way could cooperate in those types of new types of financial products, new innovative financial product?
Hong Kong has been talking about going into Islamic financing recently because of Hong Kong's greater exposure and interest in the Middle East regions. Singapore has been doing Islamic financing for a very long time, so Singapore does have a head start in Islamic finance, for example. I think green financing, both cities are on an equal footing, and on this one, both the Singapore MAS and the Hong Kong HKMA have done green bonds, tokenized green bonds. So there you can see maybe that competition I was talking about, because, and which spurs the central banks of both places to try and keep up with each other, right? To make sure that they're not, and that's good. That's innovate. That is driving innovation in both cities.
Another thing that has been very important in especially Asia and also for global is the internationalization of Renminbi. Do you think Singapore would in a way be cooperate with Hong Kong as an offshore Renminbi center in speeding up the Renminbi internationalizations?
Oh, that's a very good question. The offshore Renminbi, as you know, has a different designation, is CNH, and the H stands for Hong Kong. So it's the Chinese yuan traded in Hong Kong. Of course, CNH is also traded in London, in Singapore. Singapore and London and a few other places have direct swap agreements with the People's Bank of China for RMB settlement. Okay. As we stand today, if I remember correctly, global CNH settlement, offshore RMB settlement in Hong Kong makes up 70-75% of global CNH settlement in the world. So Hong Kong has the lion's share, and that makes a lot of sense because Hong Kong is China's native international financial center. So it makes sense that China, as it moves, as the world moves towards more RMB internationalization, it makes sense that Hong Kong will be the natural home of international RMB settlement, CNH trading. Singapore will always have a role in this. Singapore is a very big center for oil refining, oil trading, for example, commodities, as I mentioned earlier. So, and China, and these are of course things that China needs as it continues to develop. So, and as China increasingly settles these trades in CNH, in internationalized RMB, Singapore will of course be taking part in that flow, in that trade flow.
And as I understand that you have been living in Hong Kong for 26 years.
Yes.
What would you advise, as you mentioned, the Hong Kong government can do more, or something that they have been doing very good, if any, to attract young talents as you mentioned, from China, for example, from Hangzhou or from other places in the world, international talent like yourself. How can they attract young talents into Hong Kong?
I think Hong Kong attracts talent by itself. Here, the government has an easier job in the sense that it just needs to facilitate, to permit, rather than to promote. Okay, instead of having to do very active steps, it just needs to allow the flow of people to come, because the vibrancy of this city, the energy and the spirit of this city is very attractive to people who themselves are vibrant and energetic. A lot of talented people who will do things with their lives are energetic and vibrant.
Like yourself.
Oh, thank you. And the energy of the city attracts them. And so the Hong Kong government just needs to facilitate that and not hold them back, which actually is not easy, because governments have to regulate.
Yeah, very much agree. Okay, Mr. Huang, thank you
Thank you,
for
thank
coming
you,
with us
thank you
today,
so much, thank
and
you.
Hope to see you again soon.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you, Raymond.
Thank you very much for watching the Global Economic Perspectives with Raymond today. I'm your host, Raymond Chen. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next episode. Thank you and bye-bye.